Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a special guest to choose their favourite things about a Doctor Who story. I have to then guess what they are.
Hello Toby and hello everyone. My name is Richard Bignell. I am the editor of Nothing at the End of the Lane, the Doctor Who magazine of research and restoration. I was one of Doctor Who magazine's original time team, along with Jacqueline Rayner, Clay Hickman and Peter Ware. And for the past 20 years, I've been working as part of the team producing the BBC range of Doctor Who DVD and Blu-ray releases. Now for those, I produced a majority of the Now and Then location features. I act as a researcher and advisor to a lot of the content producers. I've written production subtitles, and now I act as the curator on the massive PDF archive that appears on the Blu-ray releases. And as of the time of recording, we put together nearly 25,000 pages worth of material on the sets. So, what adventure have I chosen for you to have a look at this time for Happy Times and Places? Well, we're going to go back to 1975. It's a story that encompasses 3 different locations across 2 different planets and 3 different time zones. From season 13, it's Pyramids of Mars. Now, why have I chosen this particular story? Well, season 13 has something of a special place in my heart. I was 9 years old when this story was shown, and like many children, Doctor Who scared me witless and enthralled me at the same time. But season 13 was important for me because it was the very last time that I was genuinely terrified of the programme. You see, up to the end of the Seeds of Doom, I always watched Doctor Who from behind the safety of a security cushion. But something happened to me between seasons 13 and 14, because it was at that point that I morphed from being an enthralled viewer into being a fan. And I know that it happened then because just when season 14 was about to begin, for the very first time, I went out and with my own money, I bought a copy of the Radio Times just so that I could have the cuttings for the start of The Mask of Mandragora. Target's first Doctor Who monster book came out just after Pyramids of Mars had finished on television, so that probably had quite a lot to do with it as well. Now, Pyramids was also important to me in another way, because around November 1976, my parents bought me my very first cassette recorder, and at the end of that same month, the BBC showed the 1-hour compilation version of Pyramids of Mars. So that marked the very first time that I ever audio taped a Doctor Who story from the television. And I played that tape to death. Now, I no longer have it anymore, but I can still see it in my mind's eye. The beige colour plastic, the orange label, and my 10-year-old scrawled handwriting on it. There is so much to love about this particular story, Toby, so I hope that you and everyone else will have great fun watching it again.
Oh, well, thanks to Richard for all that fascinating detail. Richard is one of the good guys of Doctor Who, one of the best of the good guys. He's done so much research for the DVDs and Blu-rays, and he's one of those people that everybody will occasionally have the need to ask a question of, and he's always ready with an answer. And in fact, sometimes unsolicited. I know he was researching something and he'd got a spare half an hour, or he'd finished early. So while he was there, he did a load of Quatermass scanning and delving and sent it to me off his own back without me asking, without me knowing he was going to do it. He's so helpful and he's such a nice guy. And Doctor Who archaeology owes him so much. So appropriate that we're going to go digging in some stock footage of Egypt to see what's going on Pyramids of Mars. It's usually in the top 10 in Doctor Who magazine polls and things like that. So I don't think we're going to have too much trouble with this one. This is one of the last Doctor Who stories I actually watched for pleasure. I was going to say relatively recently, because it was last Christmas I gave myself a week off and watch some Doctor Who for fun, and this was one of them. And I've realised it's now November, so Christmas wasn't as recently as I thought. Talk about walking in eternity. Anyway, you're welcome. Let's set sail for Stargroves. And I don't know about you, but I watch my Pyramids of Mars on lovely DVD. So I'm going to press enter on play all in 3, 2, 1. There we go. And it's beginning. So, now this is a curious one for me because I had the VHS of this, which was edited together. And I didn't realise at the time, not only was it edited together, it was actually had bits taken out of it. Richard referred to the hour-long cut there, which I've never seen or heard. And I'm sure that will be so entrenched in his memory that certain scenes in this will seem like interlopers. But stock footage of Egypt coming up is very economical, the way it sets the scene. But so there are various bits that I didn't realise until... I think I knew, but I'd not experienced the missing bits until it was then repeated when I was at university. They did some Doctor Who repeats, and I was a busy student, being young and exciting. And it was on a Sunday afternoon, I think. And so I grabbed a spare VHS. I'd taken all my Doctor Who VHSs with me to studentdom. Of course I did. I carried them around in a trunk. And I'd got one that had got an E180 that had got a 4-parter at the beginning, and the beginning of the first 3 episodes of another 4-parter that I think I then got a better quality copy of somehow because I taped over whatever that was. I think it was 3 episodes of Spearhead from Space or something. And I taped episodes 1 and 3, and then I taped 4 on another tape that chewed up, so I never got to keep 4 properly, and so I didn't actually see Pyramids of Mars or get used to it in its entirety till it came out on DVD. So in that regard, it's one of the very last, so even though it's a story I'm really familiar with because I watched that edited VHS over and over again, it was one of the first handful of stories I had because it was wisely released on DVD on VHS early. But actually what I was enjoying was very much chopped about, and I would dare to say the chopping is not necessarily to its detriment. Now, I would always say you release the broadcast version, and I certainly was, crossed that there were no closing credits and episode endings and stuff like that. But I actually think it's quite sympathetically chopped, the VHS version. But maybe that's because it's the version I'm used to. A lot of our enjoyment of Doctor Who is very subjective and born of circumstance and time and place. So it's a very economical beginning. We need to suggest a dig in Egypt, bit of superstition, bit of danger at the front. You've got, 2 speaking actors, Vic Tablian, who's run off as Ahmed. He's done various bits and bobs, still around. In fact, he's the only human... he's the only... Sutek and a couple of his mummies are still with us, but... the rest of the human cast are gone, sadly. Tom Baker in this scene. Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen in this story are amazing. I adore this scene, that sort of drawn, solemn countenance that he has. I remember Doctor Who being sort of funny and a bit mad, and Tom Baker was the Doctor I grew up with. I'm too young to remember this when it first went out. And it was only rediscovering him later as a grown-up that, that sense of sort of universal melancholy, that sort of maudlin detachment that he has, that isn't boring, it's not dreary, it doesn't bring you down, it has resonance. He's got that wonderful voice, he's got that wonderful frame, but look, he's dressed as a lunatic, but the costume works. It's not zany, but it's a bizarre alchemy, isn't it? And look at, yes, he snaps at her, but there's never any sense that these people are squabbling in an annoying fashion. Even when they're arguing, I know there are some people that think Sarah says the F word there. No, she doesn't, and they would have cut that out or made her retake it if she had. She just goes, "Ah!" in that way that Elizabeth Sladen does. And this bit's brilliant as well, the materialisation. Sutek, I think, never quite looks as good as that again, because is that projected from film? It's just a better, the mask just, or whatever it is, looks very good there. in a way that doesn't quite sustain when we see it in the cold light of day. So beautiful close-up of her looking terrified. But even though he's sort of testy and grouchy at her, it's, as I say, it's not sort of infantile squabbling that passes as characterization. This is a sort of real relationship, and she reacts to it in that she sort of goes, she behaves as if, well, I'm sort of used to this, and this is the price that you pay for, travelling around with an eccentric Time Lord, and it's sort of water off a duck's back to her. She always just keeps it. There's no glibness here, but it's also not melodrama. It's just the actors are keeping our attention. They're maintaining a charismatic and enjoyable dynamic that is very, very watchable. I would want to travel with these two anywhere and forever. And I think even the scenes where they're just, look at Tom Baker. He looks so great, and there's a slight, he doesn't bite his lip so much, but he sort of does, metaphorically, if you like. He's there's a gritty danger to him as well. This is a terrific shot from Paddy Russell of the sarcophagus, and then it's the sarcophagus reflected in the mirror that's on the organ that's being played by the Egyptian in a fez. I mean, it's just got all of that sort of glorious sort of grand guignol. It's a Robert Holmes script, even though it's, Louis Griefer wrote the inspiration for it, and it's credited to Stephen Harris. There's nothing of Griefer's in it really, and it's all sort of literary form. It's the characters, and the imagery, and they're all bred of adventure serial, but he makes them something special, and he writes these types. They're all sort of types, literary types, almost pastiche, but they're written and they're played absolutely straight, and you can do that. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron that they're going they're those pastiche types, but you believe in them. But if a certain type of acting and writing does that, and that does, this is a totally believable world contained within its own sense of melodrama, and the actors are totally committed to it. There's no sense that they're sending it up. And you could easily send up any of these characters. Warlock could be... any of them could be slayed with a slight edge of comedy. And it would still work. It would be a sort of knowing take on the genre. And it is knowing, and yet nobody's trying to be funny, although all of the performances have a certain sort of witty touch to them, but they're not winking at us as they do it. It's really cleverly judged, and it's a style of acting and presentation of character that totally fits with Doctor Who, I think. There's so many... Marie Antoinette lost her head for it. I mean, there's so many little bits of witty repartee bantering back and forth between these two, and then you've got the funny little butler character Michael Bilton, who always played old men. He's an old Time Lord in The Deadly Assassin. He's a non-speaking part in Quatermass 2. He goes back a long way. He is also in The Massacre, where he was cast by Paddy Russell, who must have first met him when she was a production assistant on or director's assistant on Quatermass 2. She might have met him many times elsewhere, but yeah, so she'd cast him in her first Doctor Who, and here he is again. Lovely actor. Had a late flourishing in a Yellow Pages commercial as an old retainer with a lawnmower, and was in Waiting for God with Stephanie Cole and Graham Crowden, set in an old people's home. Lovely character actor, and again he's playing a sort of type, but he's absolutely committed to it. He's absolutely delightful. You can tell Tom Baker is enjoying acting with him, which is always wonderful. When Tom's sort of going, I'm enjoying this performance, so I'm going to give it a little bit of deference. you can also sometimes tell, I think, when he's not quite so enamoured of somebody's performance, he's quite dismissive of it. And this, I mean, every time you think, okay, well, we're just going to have to get it, there's going to be a little bit of scene setting or something, or, something happening with the story. And that's good continuity acting of Tom there. Look, and then he does that. He does the gets down on his haunches to walk past the windows. It's, in lesser hands, that would be stupid. It's not. It's delightful. And notice I was watching an interview with Ken Grieve recently where he talked about, because I think Tom Baker likes to underplay his approach to acting and how good he is. And I think we sometimes just go, oh, well, yeah, he was just born to play the Doctor, which he was. But when he jumped out of that window, he just tipped his hat to the inside. Now, at this point, he hasn't done this studio work, but he's studied the script and he knows that they've just had a chat with a funny little butler that's probably going to be played by a character actor he's going to enjoy. So they jump out the window and he just does a little bit of a touch the hat to go, we've just come outside from talking with somebody, which is a very technically smart piece of acting, and the sort of thing you can lose track of if you're not doing, especially as these actors were very much used to, doing stuff in order. And it's only always been the sort of bits of pre-filming that take things out of order, and still very much everything's of the theatrical tradition. So he's on it. And I know he'd done film and stuff, but generally, the mindset that you're in. So that's the end of poor dear old Michael Bilton, which is rather sad because he's a very sweet character. Collins, the butler. And isn't all of this sort of Egyptian reliquary? I think. I mean, and these sort of old cases and these packing crates. It's all. Oh, it's very sad with his mouth open and dead. He's really committed to this, Peter Mayock, and I love the way Peter Copley sort of goes, "Yeah, all right, with your incantations." Because much as we like Dr. Warlock, of course, he's probably such a terrible old racist. But Copley's channeling that in a very smart way. He's another great character actor. Of sort of going, yeah, all right, you slightly intense man from a foreign clime. I shall be a bit more British about this. And but there's no sense that we as the audience are dismissive of Namin, partially because Peter Mayock is giving a very committed and intense performance. And this is interesting as well, is that, nobody particularly, I think, objects to this. Oh, people object to this bit. That they should anyway, because it's obviously a polystyrene sarcophagus. But again, no disrespect to Peter Mayock, who is acting his socks off to suggest that has any sort of weight to it at all. But then has to sort of slow down and hold it in place so that it doesn't fall over. But I love what he does with this, and of course, there's no way you'd cast him today. He was an Irishman, Peter Mayock. But it's because his makeup and hair is not quite as. I love all that, the Egyptian thing and the and I'm not sure. I'm not sure the incantation is in Egyptian in the script. I can't remember, but I've got a feeling that might have been an addition or a change to have it actually in Egyptian rather than him say, I command you by the great god Sutek to rise, or whatever it is he says, which again just gives it a little bit of authenticity within the melodrama. But it helps the melodrama because not being in English, it gives it a certain authenticity and a certain strangeness to us, but because he delivers it so well, it's authentic strangeness, even though it's probably hokey and nonsense and who knows if he's pronouncing it correctly, but it doesn't matter because they do it well. But because he's not as sort of blatantly under makeup as John Bennett is in The Talons of Weng Chiang, and I'm sure I will talk about all the issues that raises that I'm not blind to and I'm not dismissive of, and yet I don't think I've read many people moaning about Peter Mayock playing an Egyptian, but it's a similar in a fez. I mean, he's quite a stereotypical Egyptian, but because of his own colouring, I think, and because it's less blatant a transformation. We sort of let it go. Interesting. I say none of that with any judgment. because I think we can discuss historical depictions in television like adults without getting cross. We can't change what happened then, and that things happened then that we wouldn't do now. But it doesn't mean that the people that did those things then were bad, because they were at a time when that's how things were done. And hindsight is always 20/20, and sometimes I think you don't realise. I think it's fair to say you don't realise until you, yeah. I think I've got things to say about that side of things that I'll talk about with Talon's Weng Chiang, because I've also got a very interesting guest doing that one. So let's leave that to Talon's, because also it's 6 parts now. Loads loads of time to cover it. I love all of this shot. That shot of the mummy. I think the mummy costumes are great. Just having the bust. I don't know why it makes it seem like an alien version of a mummy, but the idea of having robotic mummies clambering around the woods. I mean, it sounds almost as daft, not quite as daft as Yetis in the Underground, which is another of Doctor Who's great moments, but it works because everybody plays it properly. A lot of this stuff was cut, wasn't it, in the VHS? A lot of this chase. Well, and actually, it doesn't need it, you know. And you wouldn't have this level of footage of this chase today. I think Elizabeth Sladen is beautiful, and I think she looks fantastic in that costume. And it's a nice, reedy little. It's not a guiro, is it? But it's a something or other, bit of percussion from Dudley Simpson. And yeah, it doesn't lose anything from having this cut, apart from the fact that it's really nicely done. It's really beautifully directed, and it's very, very tense. And so I perhaps only don't miss it because I was used to it not being there. Lots of blood on Warlock's hand as well. It's not often you see red blood in Doctor Who. And so we haven't had actually that much plot at all, but by God, it started as a lick, hasn't it? I mean, the Doctor, we've had a great Doctor Bignell. Oh, they did get they got the apparition in the TARDIS. So you go, oh, something's afoot, and then they land, and they're straight into the adventure. It's funny though, because I remember watching this with my well, we can talk about him in a bit. I'll carry on my thought because I'm told I interrupt myself too often. Watching this, and my brothers, who are older than me, had long since dismissed Doctor Who, and current Doctor Who is terrible, and it wasn't as good as when they were younger. I remember when I got this on VHS and had this on at home, and one of my brothers sort of came in and started watching it, and he said, "Yeah, you see, this is when Doctor Who was really good," and at a time when people were sort of still sort of were starting to look at older stuff and mocking it. That was a real. That was a real affirmation. But more Egyptian or pretend Egyptian. It just works. And all of this imagery. And it's an excellent design from Christine Rusko. But then a few years, not long after that, I had some mates around. We had a party. We had probably 6 or 7 of my closest friends from fifth form. No, it was sixth form college. And we had a boozy night, and then I did what I'd do, is I'd put a bit of Doctor Who on the next day, because it was my mission to transform everybody into a Doctor Who fan. It was my dream for my friends to go, "Toby, you're right. This is the best program ever. Tell me about the history of the Time Lords." And I remember them watching this, and with my brother's words echoing, ringing in my ears. This is good Doctor Who. They laughed at the mummies. They thought Peter Copley was a bad actor, and I realised that even my closest friends would never quite understand me. And they were all drama students as well, so it made me. It made me worried for the future. I suddenly realised that not everybody saw things through the same things that were absolutely clear as a bell to me. That Peter Copley is a great character actor, and that those mummies are scary, and a great rendition of fear placed very effectively and well designed into a children's adventure serial with just the right level of plausibility and menace. And they just thought it was rubbish. Tom Baker is at the height of his powers in this. and he's quite horrible, and he's quite alien, and yet he's radio emissions from the stars, and he's an alien. Tom Baker's Doctor is an alien, and I love that sort of sense of vague quiet amusement he gives to it. I assure you don't, but it's very nice of you to try. I mean, I could just spend all day saying how much I love Tom Baker, and this isn't nostalgia on my part, because, as I say, my initial memories of Doctor Who come from after this. So the Doctor I remember really is from season 17 and season 18, but it was just a joy to go back and to discover just how much detail he brings to it, just how interesting an actor is, just how committed he is to driving the drama, keeping the character flowing. And poor old Lawrence Scarman, the way he fans it with his hat. And this costume is brilliant, because it's a wacky costume without being wacky. It's a costume nobody else but him would wear, but that actually fits in with wherever he lands. You know, he's not like Colin Baker or even Sylvester, whose costumes I think are a little just self-consciously wacky. Sylvester's gets better when he sort of tones it down and wears the duffel coat and things like that, but it's still a costume. I sort of buy what Tom Baker wears as clothes, and I certainly think, you know, it's always better when the Doctor retains a silhouette, but doesn't wear the same thing week in, week out. You know, it's not unlike poor old Peter Davison, whose costume is excellent. It's an excellent design, but it's a costume that rarely changes. And isn't that? I mean, that's very sweet that poor old Lawrence Scarman has this machine that he's made that's brilliant, because he's invented the radio telescope, hasn't he? So he's really ahead of his time. I don't think that not enough attention is given to that. That actually the world, because of the events of Pyramids of Mars, is denied a technological wizard. Who gets treated fairly abominably throughout. Beware Sutekh. I mean, even with 2 words, Tom Baker can convey the magnitude of the danger, can't he? And Sarah, and I love that Sarah, you buy that Sarah knows this. I don't know why Sarah is a journalist in her particular field, but we buy it. We buy it because there's no reason why she shouldn't either. And it just takes for granted. It doesn't feel the need for her to go, I once did a story about Egyptian mums. You just take it. She's intelligent enough and she's game enough that we go, no, she's found that out at some time, and which means that she can contribute to the adventure. Not because this is a particular specialism, but because she's... and that bit's not on the VHS. But because she's a... she's a useful contributor to the drama. Just the organ. I mean, it's a great idea, isn't it? Because somebody playing an organ brings in aspects of, the Phantom of the Opera, and it helps with the soundtrack. But I love that it's the playing of the organ that summons the servant of Sutekh, because it's a useful device, not just. It could have been anything, but it just helps with the atmosphere and the telling of the story and what they're trying to achieve with it. And it's great because mummies are scary, but having a mummy as the main protagonist is tricky because mummies don't speak and all of that sort of thing. And they go, well, no, we'll have them as sort of background robot, basically the killers, the guard dogs, but let's make them mummies. And this is a great, very short-lived costume. And a reminder that when he starts speaking that actually Bernard Archard, to all intents and purposes, you sort of go that he must have, when he got the scripts, they must have put a little post-it note on the front saying, just read beyond episode 1 because you're not dead. I think, oh my God, the fact that he burns footsteps into the carpet is just everybody at the top of their game going, well, just this addition of smoke. Smoke is fairly simple, but they've gone, yeah, but actually let's have a bit of smoke, but let's have it burn the carpet. I mean, you see the footprints in later. I don't know if you can really see that but you can, because I believe it, whether they did or not. I think they did. Yeah, you can see that. But he's burnt holes in the carpet, which means what the hell is he going to do to this guy? And Naaman has been the main baddie, and it's a really good performance. And you think, well, he's going to be around for a bit. Oh no, then who the hell is this guy? And this is such a good cliffhanger. The burning, the screaming, the line, the cut back to the Doctor and co looking. It's horrible and brilliant and terrifying and pitch perfect and done by everybody. And I was going to choose as my favourite thing Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen's dynamic / the maudlin universal Doctor, which I might have to choose as my thing for the whole thing. We'll see what happens when we get to episode 4, because I can't not choose that cliffhanger. It's amazing. It's one of the best cliffhangers in the history of the show. I think it's a work of art. I think it's glorious. Well done, Paddy Russell. Oh, she was good, and didn't get on with Tom at all, and Tom did not get on with her, which is something I'm sure I will rattle on about in subsequent episodes. So, hoping that Richard, a reminder for casual listeners, I have to choose a favourite thing. If I choose the same thing as my guest, I get a point. If they choose something I don't choose, they get the point. However, if I choose something now that they choose in a later episode, that's in the bag for me because I'm at such a disadvantage. So if I was to choose, say, Tom Baker's hat this episode and Richard chose it for episode 3, I'd still get the point for that. However, of course, by choosing the cliffhanger, that can only be chosen now. So that's the risk I take, because I think, well, it's really good. The Tom Baker Elizabeth Sladen dynamic, I could pick for any episode, or I could pick for my bonus thing when we do part 4, and I have to choose a thing from part 4 and a bonus thing. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on here, but I think that cliffhanger is one of the greatest Doctor Who cliffhangers of all time. And so I'm hoping that Richard has chosen it. Shall we find out, everybody, what Richard Bignell, Doctor Who researcher extraordinaire, has chosen as his favourite thing of part 1 of Pyramids of Mars?
So, that was part 1. Now, what did I choose for my favourite thing in this particular episode? Well, I'm actually going to go with an aspect that could quite possibly be overlooked due to the sheer volume of this person's contribution to Doctor Who. So I'm going to choose Dudley Simpson's music for Pyramids of Mars.
It is very good.
Now, Dudley always said that this was one of his best scores, and I think I'd probably agree with him. What he was able to achieve with just a tiny group of usually 5 or 6 musicians was often quite astounding. And that really comes to the fore with this particular story. You get Simpson's wonderful scene-setting Egyptian music, along with some beautiful themes accompanying various characters throughout the story that are often quite surprisingly subtle in places where you might conventionally expect the opposite. And Dudley could be really subtle with his music. We're on a couple of years, and the very first episode of Image of the Fendal, for instance, only has 18 seconds worth of music. Dudley lets the stillness and the quietness of the wood and the priory ramp up the unease and the tension. In Pyramids, the later pursuit of Ernie Clements, which you might expect to be accompanied by some sort of frantic chase music, is actually scored with anything but. But then there's also that superbly mad and discordant organ music that Naaman plays in the Priory. And I love the fact that as the cover of the sarcophagus melts away to reveal the vortex behind, we still hear the music magically playing as he rises up and walks away from the organ.
Oh, yeah, not just a good choice, but a good explanation and a few facts in there as well. 18 seconds music in Image of the Fendal, that's something to watch out for. And there's barely any in episode 1 of Death to the Daleks either, is there? And yes, indeed, a small number of musicians. I always thought that the music playing was because it was a sign that the thing was coming through when the organ started playing itself. But maybe I just made that up in my head. I like my suggestion. I also like the suggestion that it's the incidental music picking up from where Narmin left off. You can choose either of those things. Either work, and the music helps. But what Richard didn't mention that I did during that was that rattlesnake music during the chase. That very bare minimalist stuff, which is really, really effective. Yeah, Dudley Simpson, good choice, but I couldn't not mention that cliffhanger. Well, look, thanks to Richard. So he's one up on me, and it means because some of you might have been thinking, well, hang on, Toby, if you choose something for episode 1 and he chooses it for episode 3, you get the point. How's that? Well, because also it means I now can't choose Dudley Simpson because it's been taken. So that's why. I mean, write to the Ombudsman if you don't like the point system. Thanks to Richard. Do check out his work. He does the Now and Then documentaries. His Doctor Who Location book is absolutely fantastic. But just if you see him online anywhere, follow him on Nothing at the End of the Lane. Just tip your hat to him, give him a thanks, because honestly, the scholastic world of Doctor Who would be not quite so learned without his distinguished and fastidious research. And he's not one to blow his own trumpet, or indeed play his own organ. That sentence went to a place I'm not quite sure it could have done. Oh dear. Well, I bring Toby's gift. I think Toby's gift of double entendre to all humanity. Not quite the same as the ending to episode 1 of Pyramids of Mars, but my own version. Thanks so much for listening. God, I love this story. Speak to you for part 2. But until then, ta-ta. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Richard Bignell, who can be found on Twitter at Nothing Lane, capital N, capital L, at Nothing Lane. It's Richard Bignell. I'm very grateful to the patrons of this podcast and other ventures, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Steve Manfred, Tom Neenan, Ronald Hayden, Jeff Walker, Richie, David Trainier, Ian Dean, Andrew Wilson, Ralph Chilton, Paul Carrington, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Paul Cook, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Junford Kelk, Chris Phone, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, and Ian Key. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like to be a patron? Well, if so, go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Or buy that for someone for Christmas. That's only just occurred to me. I'm recording this in the week of Doctor Who's birthday, the week of the 23rd of November. Non-patrons, you will be getting that a lot later than that. And you can work out the gap, because I don't know quite when this is coming out. But the patrons, they're getting it next week. So however far ahead of the week after the week of Doctor Who's birthday you hear this, that's how far behind you are the patrons, who get stuff much, much earlier. But they also get bonus material, some interviews with actors featured in the stories I've been commentating upon, and some random behind-the-scenes stuff from maybe some of the things I've done on DVD, documentaries and things over the years. I've got an archive full of stuff, some of which I've been going through and is quite interesting, so I pop that on the Patreon stuff as well as a bonus podcast called Far Too Much Information that is only for patrons. So you can go along to there for £3 a month. That's the lowest tier, and it's fairly egalitarian. Most stuff is available at the lowest tier, and you get a 10% discount off even the lowest tier if you sign up for a year in advance. You may not want to do that, but you may still think that I need some form of sustenance in return for my vocal labours, so you can go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke and throw some silver into my coffers whenever you are so able or inclined. But it may be that you can do neither of those things, and that's absolutely fine. But I'll tell you what's free and costs you nothing, and I'm grateful to you listening, by the way. But what's free is to go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and to give these ventures 5 stars in the ratings and perhaps a few lines of review so that casual punters can read, hopefully, your glowing words and go, I shall give that a try, because there's a lot of Doctor Who podcasts out there, and so anything that helps my algorithms stand out from those of other people just gives this a little boost and means that the labours aren't wasted. Thank you ever so much. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These have their own Twitter feed at Hadoke Podcasts, and I do a live comedy show in Manchester at 8 p.m. every Tuesday at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club, which I have run and emceed for the past 24 years. There is an internet version of the show that we started up during lockdown, and we're continuing with that on a monthly basis, 8 p.m. at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, a live comedy show from the comedians' living rooms all over the world. We've had comics from the States, from Australia, from New Zealand, and even from Wigan. So check that out, and that's at, as I say, 8 p.m. on the first Sunday of every month. However, there is an archive and selected clips and best bits up there right now if you want to go and check that out and see what is available. And I'd love to very much see you at one of the live shows one of these days. Thanks again. I should really have a script for these last bits, shouldn't I? But, you know, and should I say when I'm recording these? I'm actually recording this at 5 on the 25th of November, Thursday, the 25th of November, 2022. So who knows when you're listening to this? Because like the radio signal from Mars, there's a bit of a delay. But please, don't send me down a kaleidoscopic, sparkly sarcophagus to my doom. All right, bye.